Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Now today there's been a small piece of news and a big one, so let's start with the small ones, and that is that there's been a little bit more revealed about the special notable passive skills that you can only get through the Anointment system in 3.8.0, and here's one of them, Tenacity, as you can see here illustrated on this Astromantis. And Tenacity is a straight up power, very simple mod, but very powerful one. 5% increased maximum life, yep, you always want that. Increases and reductions to maximum life also apply to attack damage at 30% of their value. Now what this is, most characters, by the time you're level 60, you probably want to have 140% increased increased life on the passive tree, and by the time you hit about level 85, you probably want something like 170 to 200%. So let's say that you've gone with 180% by the time you're in the mid-80s. What this does is very simple. It gives you 54% increased attack damage, as well as the 5% life on it. Needless to say, this is a very, very, very powerful node. This is sort of node on the passive tree that you would path quite a while to get, I believe, and so it's something that should be regarded as a very strong pickup and a very compelling use of this new essential gear slot on your amulet. We don't have any idea how rare these oils are. I'm going to speculate that the yellow one that we see here is going to be the tier 12 rarest one. It requires 2 of them and then 1 random oil, but that is pure speculation. I could be completely wrong. I also realized I haven't mentioned Vengeance Cascade yet as well while we're talking about these passive nodes that are only available from the tree. Oh, sorry, not available on the tree, but are only available from anointing your amulet. Vengeance Cascade is really impressive. Orange, yellow, yellow. So again, I think yellow might be the rarest of these oils. 15% increased projectile speed, and then attack projectiles return to you from final target. Returning projectiles pierce all targets. Let's quickly unpack that. When a projectile hits an enemy, if it's got any pierces left, then it uses up 1 pierce. If it's used up all of its pierces, then it forks if able. If it's used up its fork, assuming that it had one, it then chains if able. And then when it's used up all of its chains, it then returns if able. So what this is going to do in practice, you're going to use this in conjunction with chain early on in a league, and then with both chain and fork once you're able to afford Rigwold's Quills. Because let's face it, Rigwold's Quills are such a broken quiver that you are going to be using it on every attack build using bows. Now, and note, of course, Vengeance Cascade only applies to attack projectiles, so no fireballs here. And what happens is that your bow uses up all of its, well, you should have no pierces, then it will fire off these, it'll fork, then it'll fire off its chains, and then once those chains are exhausted, they will all return to you. While they're returning to you, they will strike and go through, because they've got this returning projectiles pierce all targets, they will strike and go through every target that's on their way. It's actually a really solid, really solid effect, and I think that it's something that is going to be in hot demand. But the main news today was released on the Bayclast podcast, and we got a little bit more confirmation as to how the Master Mission system is going to be working. Daily missions have... people weren't clear how many you were going to get per day. It turns out you're only going to get 2. So for daily players, this is going to be a considerable decrease in the availability of master missions. On the flip side, for weekly players or even twice weekly players, for weekly players it's going to increase the amount of masters you get considerably. For twice weekly players, it's actually going to be a slight decrease there as well. So currently, daily players get all 5 masters once per day, and let's assume that 90% of the time you have access to the map that they're on and 10% you don't. So that means you're getting 4.5 per day at the moment. Twice weekly players get 9 missions per week that way. With the new system, you're going to get 2 master missions a day. So that means that your daily players are just going to have 2 total master missions, down from 4.5 in a day. Once weekly players are going to go from having 4.5 a week to having 14 a week, and twice weekly players are going to go from having 9 a week to having 14 a week. So the more you play, the more favourable to the old system the more favourable the old system was to you, and the less favourable the new one. Now, so you'll get 2 master missions per day allocated just at random, and then you will get more of them for killing map bosses. So this is the reward that people have been waiting for a long time, for killing map bosses. Map bosses haven't been worth doing for a long time. It's been generally a dominant strategy to only engage bosses if you can either one-shot them or at least come very close to it. Well, that meta is dead. Now you will be killing bosses, and you will want to be killing higher tier bosses as well. You also pick the map when you're using it, so for that reason you will always be able to use the highest tier in a category. So what I mean by that is that you will sometimes, when you kill a map boss, you'll be rewarded with a red map Nico mission or a yellow map Einhar. Under the old system, when you got a yellow map Einhar, it might have been placed on a specific tier 7 map, and so you were only able to access it at tier 7. Now you can roll up a particularly juicy tier 10 and give that to Einhar when you want to start your Einhar daily mission. So that's going to be significant, and that will be quite an improvement. One thing I'm really concerned about is that I feel it will make quite a difference to player progression on day 1 of a league, which players get lucky and get Nico, and which players don't. I think that day 1 delving is a really underrated strategy, and I don't like the way that you're going to be at a severe disadvantage in building your delve mines on the first day of the league if you get unlucky and don't have Nico there. I do need to see how this works in practice. I may be overrating it, but that injection that you used to get of, say, 700 or 800 sulfite on day 1 was a really significant contributor to getting an early stack of Chaos Orbs, Alchemy Orbs, Val Orbs, and the like. All the key mapping consumables that you use so many of. But anyways, we'll need to see how that works in practice. The big change, I think, is going to be to Jun. It is now going to be much more important to do your betrayal missions on tier 12 and higher maps. The reason for this is that if you do a Jun map on a tier 12, then the monster level in the zone is 79, which means that rare monsters in the zone drop item level 81 equipment, item level 81 or higher. It makes a huge difference to how quickly you unveil mods if you are doing getting item level 81 items, because then they have access to the top tier of unveilable mods. And you get 4 times as much XP for unveiling a tier 3 mod as you do for unveiling a tier 1, with the tier 2s being double the XP of a tier 1. So it's a 1 to 2 to 4 ratio in the amount of XP that you get in towards your unveils. I think a lot of the concerns people have had in previous leagues about betrayal content unveils feeling too slow may have come from them doing Jun missions on lower tier maps. Now I think it's going to be much more difficult. Even doing the higher tier maps, I think you're going to find that getting a lot of crafts is going to be a lot harder, especially in solo self-found, than it used to be. I'm okay with this. I think that some of the top tier crafts are good to have as a whole of league goal rather than as just something that you automatically get through a small amount of play. Obviously, there's a lot of people that have this attitude of, I need the best craft now, otherwise I can't play the game, and that's just wrong. You don't need the best craft now, just like you don't need a level 99 or 100 character to play the game. And actually, the game is more fun when you are missing these things. The game is more fun when you're like, oh, I'm currently level 87. I've got a whole bunch of minor upgrades available to me that are starting out pretty easy. You know, hitting level 88 and getting that next passive, 89 and getting 2 passives. These are going to be goals that are all quite achievable, and then they get more and more and more difficult to acquire over time. And getting the first tier of each of the craftable each of these craftable mods is going to be something that will feel a little bit impactful when you get it, and then you can use that on the gear that you're using early in the league with a goal towards upgrading to better stuff later. One thing I will point out, though, it is entirely rational to ignore Jun's missions entirely, should you wish to do that. And it is also entirely rational to ignore the unveiling system entirely. I think in this league, there will be a big market for item level 81 and higher still veiled items. So if you get these, then sell them to other players. If you're in a trade league, everything veiled that you get that is not linked to a specific master, I suggest you should pick these up and sell them at put them into a tab at 5 chaos. And ideally, if someone messages you saying, "Hey, I want to buy your veiled belt," ask them, do they want to buy all of them? I do think, however, that some specific crafts are going to be an absolute nightmare to get. And these are the rare ones that don't have a lower tier mod. A good example of this is gloves with physical conversion to a specific element. This mod's pretty rare as it is. You need 6 unveils of it in order to learn it as a crafting mod. And I really think that GGG should, as a matter of urgency, introduce a lower tier version of this. So keep the 20 to 25% premium one that's hard to unlock, but add in a 15 to 19% tier below it. For players that are just looking for something to get started, they can go with that 15 to 19%, and then they can spec a couple of nodes on the passive tree to get the rest of the conversion that they're looking for. Later on, though, they can then work towards getting the real craft at a later stage, sort of as a whole of league encounter. So, for Jun, the takeaway is do her on tier 12 and higher maps. Still do run her when you get her on lower tiers. So if you get a yellow Jun, do run it. And I suggest that you also keep an eye on if you've got a Jun that is on a yellow tier map, that you run it on at least a tier 8. Because tier 8 is a breakpoint where you can get all of the mods that are locked to certain masters. And actually, make a correction on that. It's tier 6 because they drop +2 levels, so it's item level 75 is where that comes in. So for that reason, actually, yeah, yellow Juns are considerably better than white Juns, but red ones that are on tier 12 and up are better again. Zana is now worth doing again for synthesis boss encounters. Just the chance of getting Bottled Faith, the flask from a Cortex from Zana, is going to be incredible. That flask is insanely overpowered, and the Cortex encounter is very difficult, so if you get it, you should probably ask around for help if you're not familiar with the fight. Just think of it as being something like you've got I'm just trying to think of a really lucrative boss. I can imagine if the Shaper turned up in one of your maps, and not only was the Shaper there, but his loot table was going to be different, and he was more likely to have a Starforge. That's what Zana's Cortexes are going to be like. If you get one of these, then it should be something somewhat exciting. They also sound to be quite rare at the moment. According to the discussion that happened on the Bay Class podcast, they're going to be as rare as Untainted Paradise. Now, I haven't seen Untainted Paradise in several leagues myself. That said, I do miss a lot of Zana missions, so I'm not sure how rare it is, but potentially the synthesis encounters might be very, very, very rare. And we might be talking Bottled Faith being a flask that's worth a mirror or more if it goes live like that. Now, Nico is going to continue to be the most powerful of the masters, and it's more important now to do Nico as a rotation than it used to be, when you could rely on, okay, I'll get another Nico tomorrow. Now you can't rely on that, and on average you're going to get 3 a week, but sometimes you're just going to have bad stretches as well. So when you've got Nico missions, do them as rotations. You just simply get more out of them, and that will be something you'll just need to do. Elva, her content really hasn't aged very well. The Incursion Temple doesn't have any extraordinarily valuable rewards, and the few that exist, like the Corruption Altar, are generally something that you can buy from other players when you need them, or target farm when... You can't quite target farm it, but you can start focusing on her content again when you've, say, got a second Rigwald's Quills ready to double corrupt. I think that Elva is going to feel really bad in this league. Einhar is the last one, and I think he's actually going to be more accessible in trade leagues now because people often ignore Einhar or run him solo, but now that you can just bank up 5 missions, then go bang, 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 I think there'll be an increase in people doing rotations. So I think beasts will actually be more available than they are at the moment. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the master changes. I think that it's going to feel different. Jun is going to feel worse. Nico's going to feel worse. Like, this is, in some ways, this is the nerf that Delve needed to the amount of loot that it puts into the economy. And the other masters will be less important. I would like to see perhaps a change whereby you get a third master mission if you have completed a map in the previous day. So, you get your 2 by default, but then you get a third if you've completed a map that last day. However, I think that the scarcer that this content gets, the more lucrative it's going to be in a trade league anyway. So I don't think it's some massive problem if they are made rarer. Just making things more common ends up reducing the value of them. We've seen that with maps. In the Incursion League, you could realistically farm excess maps and sell enough of them to buy a headhunter. In the more recent leagues, maps have been worth very, very little. So every time you get a map, it's a much less significant drop. I think that's going to be the case with the Masters. They're scarcer. That's going to make them worth more every time they show up. Anyways, you got any questions? Fire away below. Otherwise, hope you have a good one.